It's Aloha Friday, everybody. Grab a little umbrella, put a flower in your hair. The weekend is almost here. Good morning, I'm Brino, and this is the Aloha Friday morning report on the federal courts for September 26th, 2025. Please double tap your screen, comment what's in your coffee, and try to watch at least through the intro so we'll surf into the FYP. Check my wish list if you can, links in my bio. I'm stocking up for Supreme Court fall term, and I need some stuff. All right. Let's hit the news. Okay, we're coming in real strong out of the gate with US v. Comey. Now, I talked about this last night, but for those of you who missed it, it was widely reported on the news yesterday that former FBI Director James Comey was indicted in federal court on 2 charges. First, he lied to the Senate when he said he had not authorized someone at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports. And second, by lying to that senator, he impeded a congressional investigation. So both charges were related to that one statement. According to The Hill, and I'm using sources because the indictments don't have names, Ted Cruz asked Comey if he had authorized a leak to the Wall Street Journal about investigations into Hillary Clinton's emails and Trump-Russia connections. Comey said he was unaware of the leak, but Andrew McCabe, his former deputy, suggested at the time that Comey had authorized the leak. But there was also a third count that the feds tried to get the grand jury to indict yesterday, but the grand jury refused. And I'm pretty sure this is why they brought the case in the first place. So according to BBC News and New York Times, the third allegation is that Comey lied to Lindsey Graham when he said he was unaware of Hillary Clinton approving any sort of election interference plan against Donald Trump. And that's what they really wanted here. They wanted to bust Comey for knowing about a plan so that they would have proof that an election interference plan existed and it was some sort of FBI deep state operation. But the grand jury said no dice, which means there was probably about zero evidence that this claim is true because getting a grand jury to indict is not difficult. So I put all of these files in my shared documents. I renamed the important one Read This for now because they all kind of look the same, but it's under criminal cases and under Comey. So go give it a look for yourself. All right, next we're going to talk about US v. Leahy, and we get to talk about the 13th Amendment, which doesn't actually get talked about a lot, so it's kind of exciting. Now, the 13th is one of the Civil War amendments, and it bans, for algorithm purposes, I will say involuntary servitude, or let's say slavery. But the second clause of the 13th Amendment allows Congress to write laws to enforce the 13th. So Congress has been allowed to write laws that ban what are called badges and incidents of slavery. And one of the laws that Congress has written for that is 18 U.S.C. Section 245, which makes it a federal crime to use force or threats to interfere with someone's use of a public facility because of race. And yesterday, the 11th Circuit applied that authority to a violent Florida road rage case. A 3-judge panel upheld the conviction of Jordan Leahy, who repeatedly tried to ram a black father and his family off a public road while yelling slurs and making threatening gestures. Writing for the court, the judge said that it, quote, was not a close question, explaining that blocking a person's movement to a public road because of race is exactly the kind of badge of slavery that the 13th Amendment empowers Congress to fight. So, you don't see a ton of 13th Amendment cases around these days, but now you know what they look like, so you can recognize them. Okay. Escobar Molina v. DHS. A new class action suit in D.C. is challenging the alleged use of warrantless arrests by plainclothes masked federal agents across the district. In a 36-page complaint, Molina v. DHS targets President Trump's August 11th crime emergency, which federalized the D.C. police and brought in National Guard troops, as well as federal agents from ICE, DEA, Homeland Security, and FBI to perform regular patrols on the streets. And according to the filing, the agents have arrested over 3,000 people since the emergency began, often without asking names, checking ID, or making individualized probable cause assessments. One plaintiff, Jose Molina, a 25-year-old D.C. resident with valid TPS status, was cuffed on his way to work and held overnight until ICE realized that he was here legally and released him. Another, an asylum seeker from Venezuela, was grabbed in a Home Depot parking lot and detained for 4 weeks before his release. The coalition of groups bringing this suit says the tactics violate the Fourth Amendment as well as clear statutory limits on immigration arrests, and they're asking a federal judge to halt the sweeps and expunge arrest records. Now, the White House and Homeland Security have not responded to the allegations yet, This is just a complaint. We'll see what the response says. But these cases are becoming more and more prevalent, and people keep asking me how these actions don't violate the Fourth Amendment. Well, it very well may. We're probably going to find out here. Okay, pulling into port here, we have got State of Illinois v. FEMA. A Rhode Island district court just ruled that FEMA disaster aid cannot be withheld based on a state's willingness to comply with new immigration requirements imposed by the Trump administration. So we've seen a few of these cases lately. I want to brush past something real quick because I'm asked this a lot. So the federal government has a limited list of things that it can control. Sometimes it wants to control something that's not on that list, and it does so by withholding discretionary funds unless the states comply willingly. So one very famous example, the federal government wanted to change the drinking age to 21, but it couldn't. So instead, it tied 10% of federal highway funds for each state to that state's willingness to voluntarily raise its own drinking age. And in South Dakota v. Dole, the court said that was legal for two reasons. One, it's only 10%, not a big percentage. It's more of a suggestion than a requirement. And two, and this is important, there is a strong enough connection between funding highway improvements, including safety improvements, and preventing the large number of DUI wrecks that were happening at the time involving young drivers. So the core purpose of both the highway funding and the age limit change were to prevent fatal accidents on the highway. Okay, got all that? Let's head back to Illinois v. FEMA. Now, this case started when FEMA added immigration enforcement conditions to every federal emergency and disaster grant. So in order for states to get hurricane recovery or cyber defense or wildfire response or flood response, they would first have to agree to assist federal agencies like ICE to enforce federal immigration law. But remember, the federal government is not allowed to force states to help them enforce federal laws. That is a violation of the 10th Amendment. So here the government said, oh, we're not forcing them. We're just withholding funds until they decide to do it themselves, just like in that highway example. But the judge in this case didn't buy it. Now think back to the two reasons that it was okay to withhold those highway funds and compare them to this situation. First, this is 100% of the funding, not 10%. So this is not a suggestion anymore. This is an order. And second, the core purpose of FEMA is to recover or prevent damage from disasters. The core purpose of immigration is about, immigration. They're not related. And I can see your brain spinning. Don't hurt yourself. Whatever you're thinking, no, they're not connected. If you have to do gymnastics to find a connection, it's not there. So this is a pretty big win for states right now. This was a final decision, not a preliminary injunction. This was actually a decision on the merits. And there are some other cases like this out there that are very similar in fact pattern. So if this survives appeal, because it'll obviously be appealed, it's going to be good news for states, and I'd say probably for federalism as well. All right, everybody, that is your Aloha Friday morning report and a wrap on another week in the federal courts. Thank you all for your support. I cannot do this without your help. Fa'afatai lava. I really appreciate it. Mahalo for watching. Have an amazing weekend. I will see you Monday. Manuia leaso. Have a great weekend.